as a judge.
Are we live again? I think we are. Yeah, I'm just waiting.
Okay, yes.
I just-
Answer it again. Do you have any more, does the applicant have any more presentation? Are you done?
Yeah, no, I have actually just one finish follow-up with him, and then I have one more witness, and then we will be resting.
Okay. Then you'll rest.
So we're back on. HC, there was some discussion regarding a letter from your current landlord. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you identify, for the record, what it is that I just handed you?
Yes, this is a declaration of the discontinuance of use of the property, meaning our existing store location.
And does this also acknowledge that they agree that Sheetz shall have the right to cease its use of the property for what's called the discontinued use, which is defined as gas or fueling station?
Yes,
And this was received by, identified Peter and Janice Menard, is that right?
yes, it is.
And those are your current landlords, is that right?
Yes, they are.
And that's for the facility
The
located in
the
Sheetz.
existing convenience store operation, yes, and closed gasoline service station.
And the photographs that we showed previously showing that the fueling pumps were removed, that was for this facility?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, yeah.
Are you going to present a witness on the environmental effects of this?
We will have one more witness, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It will be an exhibit, yes. So what I'm for is what you have said, he was going to do to also submit all the information that has been submitted, and I can give you copies, and I'll give that a copy. We want to mark it. Sure. Doesn't matter as long as they're all, as long as it's all identified. You guys want, we have copies of that as well. Perfect. Okay. Okay, I will call our last witness, Matt. Matt, can you please identify yourself for the record?
Sure. My name is Matthew Cutshall, Cutshall.
Who are you currently employed by?
Sheetz Incorporated.
And what is your position with Sheetz?
Environmental Compliance Manager.
And just again, to give a ballpark, what are your general responsibilities in that position?
Sure. I deal with all aspects of UST system compliance, from property acquisition due diligence through permitting, registrations, installation, routine compliance testing, use and operation of UST systems through closure of stores and subsequent removal of UST systems.
How long have you held that position with Sheetz?
About 5.5 years with Sheetz. I did work in a different department with Sheetz for about 1.5 years prior to that.
Was that still in environmental compliance?
It was in petroleum construction.
Okay. And from an educational background, do you have any background that would be beneficial in terms of, from the environmental standpoint?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in environmental geology from Juniata College. I graduated in 1997.
Okay. And I've asked everybody this question. They generally laugh at me, but could you speak generally how many stores that you've been involved in the development of?
Well, over 8 years, building 30 to 40 stores a year, several hundred.
Okay, and if you could just, I think it may be easier for, if there's some points that you'd like to discuss or identify for council in terms of what Sheetz does specifically to go ahead and ensure all environmental compliance and safety.
Sure. Some of the things that we felt it necessary to bring to everyone's attention regarding our UST systems, we use, as I also spoke to the last time I was here, we use state-of-the-art double wall UST systems across all of our stores. All of our tanks are brine-filled tanks. All product piping is also double wall. Every single thing that we use for our UST systems meets all federal and state requirements for UST system components. In addition, everything all the equipment that is part of our underground storage tank system, whether it's equipment on top of the tanks, the dispensers themselves, all of that equipment is contained within a liquid-tight containment sump. We call them sumps, designed that if there is any type of release, that material is contained within a liquid-tight sump to prevent any releases to the environment. We monitor basically every portion of that underground storage tank continuously, 24/7, 365 days a year. Every containment sump, every product line, beneath every dispenser is monitored with a sensor continuously, 24/7, 365. Those alarms are polled every 15 minutes at a corporate center in Altoona, and any alarm that is found every 15 minutes is immediately dispatched out to an on-call service technician employed by Sheetz for investigation. The federal and state requirements of Pennsylvania require that any sensor alarm that activates be investigated within a 24-hour period. Sheetz internal policy and procedures, those alarms are investigated within 6 hours. The same as all portions of the system are monitored by sensors, all the product lines that deliver fuel to all the dispensers are monitored continuously by what's called a line leak detector. It continuously monitors the pressure in that line delivering the product to the dispenser. If it senses an abnormality, it also immediately goes into alarm, generates an alarm that's investigated, but what it also does is it immediately shuts the flow of gas down if it detects that there is any type of leak in that particular line, that particular grade of petroleum. The other technique that we utilize, as well as everyone else, is stage 1 vapor recovery to ensure no fugitive emissions are put into the atmosphere. As I've testified to before, stage 1 vapor recovery is the process by which vapor that is displaced when delivery of product is made into a tank, that vapor, instead of going to the atmosphere, that vapor is collected and put back on the delivery truck that delivers our fuel, and that is taken back to the terminal where the fuel came from. So the design of that, and again, it's a state as well as a federal requirement, is to not discharge that petroleum vapor into the air. We operate and maintain stage 1 vapor recovery systems at all of our stores. If I could also talk to the new there's new federal regulations that came out. They have become effective this month. Those federal requirements dictate that every gasoline station be inspected on a monthly basis for a very small set of criteria. It's less than 10 items that are looked at as part of the federal requirements. That's required to be done monthly as well as an annual inspection. Sheetz, in order to be proactive, we do monthly inspections every month. However, we also do what we refer to as quarterly comprehensive inspections. We send a company out to every store every single month, and we ask them approximately 100 questions about our UST system. And we do that every 4 months as a matter of being proactive to be protective of the environment and make sure our equipment is maintained. Far exceeds the federal requirements that just came out. And then lastly, with regard to the UST systems that we operate, the group in which I reside is responsible for all of the required testing of that equipment, whether it's testing of the containment sumps, whether it's testing the product lines, any of the equipment associated with that UST system. Our group facilitates that testing. It's done on either an annual basis or a 3-year basis, depending on what piece of equipment you're talking about. Again, that's part of the responsibility that my department has.
So I wanted to give council a general overview in terms of what Sheetz does that exceeds federal and state regulations, and otherwise to comply with all applicable statutes, regulations, ordinances. So although it's not something that's specifically identified as a criteria that needed to be met, we assume that council may have questions or want some additional information, and as such, ask Matt to just run through basically some of the highlights of what Sheetz does and where they exceed the requirements under the ordinances. Lastly, Matt, though, as a result of your knowledge regarding the operations of existing in the proposed Sheetz facility, again, the proposed operations facility you wouldn't anticipate them to generate any adverse impacts greater than anticipated for any other gasoline station.
I would not.
And in some respects, it actually would be more greatly protected.
Correct.
Okay. Unless council has any questions. Okay. Nothing further from our side.
Okay, at this point, it is time for the objectors who are able to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses. If it would be possible, just to save time, could we have all of the applicant's witnesses kind of up here at front? So if one needs to be addressed, they can just grab the mic and speak, just make it just a little easier, so.
Oh, I thought you were going there.
Would that be okay, just to have the witnesses up here, so whenever they're asked questions, they can just grab the mic and answer?
And they may be using
Right, so just be, that's fine.
Okay.
I've forgotten David's last name.
Master Step. David.
Okay, all right. May I ask you a few questions? You want to step up to that mic, please? And sure. Will you please state your name again?
Yes, David Mastro Stefano.
Okay. Would it be possible for you to put back the displays that you were using when you were testifying?
Is there a specific one? I showed like 10.
Well, certainly the first one, it was a black and white that showed the existing conditions. Thank you. So as we look at this image, to the left is north. Is that right?
This is north.
Yes. Okay, to the left is north. Okay. So the parcel at 131 Montclair, what is the property zoned which is east of 131 Montclair?
If this being 131 Montclair, east
Yes.
of it is R2.
Okay. How is 131 Montclair currently developed? How is it improved? What's on it?
It's a house and a shed. That-
Excuse me, why is he permitted to talk about 131 and we weren't?
Thank you. That was just where I was going.
Because they use this slide to show both the existing conditions and zoning of the surrounding property.
But you said we weren't allowed to discuss 131.
Well, their presentation wasn't supposed to include it, but part of their obligation is to show the impact on surrounding properties. They use this. This is their image. It shows 131, and I think it's important to show that since we're only looking at the Perry Highway parcels, the adjacent property to the east is a residentially developed property.
Councilmember Powers, I would just suggest, we gave, understanding the objection by Mr. Ferguson, we took that into account and allowed Mr. Wodos to show, both parcels as he was describing. So I would recommend that we allow Mr. Ferguson some leeway in the same manner.
I mean, I understand the ruling. However, again, for the record purposes, I'd like to state that the only thing that was discussed with respect to 131 Montclair was the actual zoning of what Montclair was.
You really have to be kidding. I mean, we put up a number of displays that showed a Sheetz convenience store on 131. So it's not as if we haven't seen numerous images. The light study, all of it showed full development of this site. So now to preclude us from sort of responding to what everyone in this room has seen, I think would perhaps lead to an imbalanced presentation.
And that's why I recommended to council that you give it some leeway to go down that path, Mr. Ferguson.
Okay, thank you. I won't stay here long. So I'm not sure if he answered the last question. I'll just ask it again. So the property to the east of 131 Montclair is zoned how? East of 131 Montclair. How is it zoned?
Zone C3. Oh, east, I'm sorry.
East.
R2.
R2. The property across from 131 Montclair is zoned how?
R2.
How is it developed?
Residential.
And the property east of 131 Montclair, it's developed how?
Residential.
Okay. Okay. You testified that all fueling operations are located in the RC zoning district. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by fueling operations?
Where the vehicles, the customers come in and actually load fuel into their vehicles is done underneath the fuel island canopy at the 5 multi-pump dispensers. The discharge of fuel delivered to the site that eventually gets into the customer's cars is done on the at the underground storage tanks, which are also all in the RC district.
Well, are you telling the board here today that the building, which is labeled store, is not relevant to the canopy and pumps?
I'm not sure what you mean by relevant.
Do they have anything to do with the operation of the canopy or the pumps? Does the building itself have anything to do with the operation of the canopy or the pumps?
The building has the electrical supply that eventually feeds electric for the whole site through a transformer. The transformer is in the RC district. It's in an island about right here. So the actual transformer that supplies electrical service to the entire site is located there. Electrical feeds into the building, which energizes the entire site.
Okay. Anything else?
People have the opportunity to pay at the pump, which the vast majority of people do, but some people actually fuel, then go into the store, buy something, and can also pay for their fuel inside.
Anything else?
That's all I can think of.
Okay. So, what about employees? Is there any place for employees to work? That is, with regard to the pumping of fuel, servicing of the pumps, at the canopy or at the pumps themselves? Where are the employees? Where do they operate out of?
All the employees operate out of the convenience store. We are a self-serve company, which means the operation done at the fuel island canopy is done by the customer, either through a credit card or some other means of payment. However, we are required to offer assistance to either handicapped individuals or other individuals who need additional assistance. They can hit a button on the pump, and someone inside the store will come out to assist them.
So you're required to have employees, and those employees that you're required to have for the operation of the pumps are in the building.
I'm just going to object, having a standing objection to all of this. I don't know why this is relevant for the purposes of the use of the RC district, whether or not there's a building located on the C3 that ultimately may be approved as part of the land development is not relevant for the purposes of what we've talked about and what the actual criteria is related to the RC district.
Every question I'm asking is establishing the relevancy.
I fail to see it.
I think he just said he wants a standing objection, but I think he.
Okay. All right. All right. So you said that by law you need to have employees available to assist people who are using the pumps, and those employees operate out of the store. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. You represented in your application that your application involves 38 parking spaces, which is what you determined you needed. Is that right? Sheets determined it needed 38 spaces. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. But only about 12 of those spaces are actually in the RC district.
that is correct.
So for you to meet your parking obligation, your parking needs, you must include 131 Montclair to provide the balance of the parking spaces.
For the conditional use, which is only in the RC, the requirement is parking for the number of maximum employees, which is 8. We have 12. So with respect to what is before the board today, for the conditional use, we meet that requirement.
How many are in the RC district? How many parking spaces are in the RC district?
I believe I said we're 12.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. I wondered if you counted them.
I believe I did count them.
Okay. All right. All right. How about your dumpster? So when people use the paper towels, when the garbage bins fill up, you don't have a dumpster on this site, do you?
We do have a dumpster on the site.
When you say the site, what site are you referring to?
I'm referring to the overall site, but it is not relevant. This is dealing with the RC district, which is the fueling operation. The dumpster is part of the land development, which will be before this board in the future.
So you're making relevancy rulings. So you're going to have waste receptacles, and you're going to provide, not only for people to provide to dispose of all kinds of waste, but you have towels and things like that. And the only place that you have to dispose of that rubbish, there is no place in the RC district to dispose of that rubbish. Isn't that right?
No, that is incorrect.
Okay. Where do you dispose of the rubbish in the RC district?
We have receptacles at each fuel pump.
No,
So
I
there's-
mentioned that. I mean, where do you dispose of it once they're full?
Once they're full, they go into the dumpster enclosure.
Which is located where?
That is located at the back of the site.
On 131 Montclair.
Yes.
Okay. Now, why do you call that the back of the site? Because there are 3 parcels along Perry Avenue, aren't there? Where's the rear yard of the Perry Avenue parcels?
Well, like I said, this hearing is about the RC, which is in the front. So
Right.
I'm calling the rear because I'm saying the front parcel in question is the RC. So I'm saying the rear of the RC is the C3 district. So that's why I'm referring to it as the rear.
Okay, so let's make sure council heard that. The rear of the RC is the C3.
Yes.
So when council is supposed to evaluate one of the most fundamental questions, which is setbacks, and you're asking them to exclusively focus on the Perry Highway properties, you're saying, well, we don't have any rear yard setback on the Perry Highway properties. You have to go on to 131 Montclair, and there you'll find our rear yard. Is that your position?
Again, I'm going to object to that. The courts have made it abundantly clear that conditional use comes first. You need to be able to go ahead and have approval of your use before you move on to land development, subdivision, consolidation, You have to have your approval of the conditional use or the use of the property before you move on to land development or subdivision. These are all items that are currently pending in accordance with case law and in accordance with the township's request. That has all been tabled until the conditional use approval
Well,
process.
This-
Excuse me, Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Willis, I think you'll have an opportunity to redirect, first of all. And also, I think those are legal arguments that are probably more appropriate for a closing.
Well, again, I need to make them on the record then, since I got to preserve my rights.
Understood.
Well, this may come as a surprise, but front, rear, and side yard setbacks are part of the conditional use approval.
Mr. Ferguson, can you just stick with the cross-examination? You have a chance.
Okay,
to
I was just
this,
responding.
so-
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. All right, so I was cross-examining on rear yards. So it is your position that you did not take into consideration rear yards on the Perry Highway properties, or rear yard setbacks from the property line of the Perry Highway properties.
I would say no.
If you had done that, do you know what the rear yard setback is in the RC district?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, let me show you. Section 1328.02. You tell us what is the rear yard depth minimum for commercial properties.
100 feet.
So if we were to measure from the rear boundary line of those properties that you just want us to focus on, that canopy would be in the rear yard, would it not? And it would not be within the buildable area of the lot. Isn't that right?
If we're using the RC line, C3 line as the boundary line, 100 feet would put the canopy inside that 100 feet.
Thank you. What about product storage? So, for example, paper towels, windshield washer fluid that goes inside of the receptacles with the where you have the thing to wash your windshield with, and other products that are available, windshield washer fluid. The products that are available at the under the canopy, where are those stored?
They're stored in containers underneath the canopy.
Okay. Is that the only place that they're stored?
I'm not familiar with the overall interior operation of the Sheetz convenience store, so I couldn't tell you definitively where extra product is stored.
Okay. How about supplies that are necessary to clean and maintain the pumps and the canopy, such as products to dry oil, just cleaning products and so on? Where are those stored?
Well, there are spill kits out at the pumps. Maybe Mr. Cutshaw, being our environmental compliance individual, would be able to speak more definitively to that, because I'm not familiar with that operation. But I believe we do have spill kits out at the pumps. As far as what items are contained within the store, again, I am not involved in the operation or the storage of those items inside the store, so I can't comment.
Okay. How about electrical panels used to turn the lights on, the lights off, the pumps on, the pumps off, and any other utilities that are serving the canopy and the pumps and other improvements in the RC district? Are some of those contained within the building?
Yes, they are.
Is there a telephone at the pumps or in the canopy anywhere?
Telephone, no.
Okay. Is there an internet connection at the pumps?
We have internet connectivity at our stores. I know you can connect to the internet within the convenience store. I do not know how far outside the store that range is, so I could not tell you if someone is sitting at the pumps, whether they can connect to the Wi-Fi of the store or not.
Okay. But the program that monitors the purchasing and dispensing, that keeps records of the purchasing and dispensing of fuels, that is tracked on the inside of the building by an employee, is it not?
I don't know if it's tracked inside the building by employee or not. I'm not familiar with how we collect that data and do purchases.
Okay. Now, do you know specifically whether the proposed storage tanks for fuels are located within 300 feet of the property lines of residences?
I do not know that.
Okay. Now, since that issue comes up under the FHA, and it's not a McCandless Township issue or even a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania issue, is this an issue that has arisen in other developments with which you've had experience?
No, actually, this is the first time it's come up.
Okay, great. Okay, that's all the questions I had. If I may.
Do you want to wait? Do you want to do the
Oh,
same
go ahead.
process?
I was gonna suggest that if the other objectors had any questions while this witness was up, give them an opportunity, and then you could redirect, Brian.
All right, so we'll keep it all now.
Yeah, I know
Okay.
I think that'll work the best.
All right, so I'll just yield to anybody else who.
So if either of the other objectors who entered as parties have any questions for this witness?
I do.
Who are not represented by counsel?
Oh, not represented.
Right. So that would be Mr.
Yes, sir.
Good evening again, Frank Zandier, 8707 Casa Grande Drive. Been a resident in McCandless at that address for 42 years. I've seen a lot of drawings and plans go up during this presentation. Just a little bit of background on myself so I could.
Mr. Zandier, if I could, you will have an opportunity to testify and make comments, but this is your chance only to ask cross-examination questions.
Okay.
To this witness.
All right, so I see the agenda, and it says a public hearing on the conditional use application filed by Sheets for a service station located at these three addresses. I'm really confused, and I've looked at a lot of drawings in my career. Where is the service station, this complete service station for these three addresses in any of this presentation?
And I'm sorry, you have to address your questions to this witness specifically.
Yeah,
If you-
okay. I'm reading the words, and I'm used to reading contracts in words, and it says these three addresses have a service station. That's what you're looking for. And I'm trying to understand what this service station looks like on these three properties, because we can't talk about the other ones.
It's the fueling operation of the 5 multi-pump dispensers that dispense fuel into vehicles. It's that operation and the operation of the underground storage tanks where the fuel is stored.
Okay, so every gas station I've been into, there's attendants, there's somebody, cashiers, there's something that has to support that dispensing operation you talk about. Where are they in this gas station on these three?
Well, like I said, a majority of the purchases made of fuel when people pull up to those dispensers is done at the dispensers themselves.
Okay, so let's not talk about those. Let's talk about the ones that don't use their debit card. Where do you provide the service station services on those three lots?
Those that
Complete.
choose not to use a credit card at the pumps or choose gas or purchase inside will have to go inside the store and make that purchase.
But I'm not talking about that inside part.
I don't know what else to say. I believe I'm
Well,
answering your question.
I'm trying to understand what you guys are presenting, because I live fairly close. And I'm reading that you want to put a service station on those three properties, and I don't understand any of the drawings that you've presented that say, here's the service station we're putting on these three properties.
Mr. Zandier, I think he's answered the question to the best of his ability. Do you have any additional questions?
Did he did answer it?
He made an attempt a couple times, and he said that was the best answer he could give. I'm not sure what else.
I'm not sure what more you're getting at.
Let me see if I have any other. In the safety presentation of the traffic, and maybe you're not the guy.
I am not
to
the guy.
Address this question to whoever that might be.
We're going to go through all. Yeah, we're going to go through all the witnesses that presented for the applicant. So when Mr. Rooster comes up, you'll have your opportunity to question him at that time.
Oh, so you're going to go one at a time?
One at a time,
And then
yes.
I'll come back up to.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
Mr. Zander, if you want to take a more Mr. Zandier, if you want to take a seat up front, you can, it's up to you.
I'm already here.
And I think that leaves Ms. Crawford as our last party objector, if she has any questions for this witness. Okay. All right, so I believe Mr. Wotus, any redirect?
Just briefly. So David, there's been some questions coming to you regarding the operations on the C3 parcel.
Yes.
And we would all agree that that's not relevant for the purpose of the application that's currently
I'm going
pending, is that right?
to ask the witness rule on the relevance of the questions.
I'm sure Mr. Wotus can rephrase this question.
The application that we're dealing with this evening is dealing solely with respect to the RC parcels, is that right?
That is correct.
And on the RC parcel, as shown on the site plan depicted this evening, that included the fueling island canopy and the fuel pumps, is that right?
That's correct. Along with the underground storage tanks.
And you had an opportunity to review the zoning ordinance prior to this evening, is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall how the ordinance defines what a service station is? Do you have a copy of the ordinance in front of you?
No, I don't.
We provide. So we're looking at sections 132811 B1, which is identified as service station. Could you just go ahead and read the first sentence?
132811B1, service station. A service station is a facility used primarily for dispensing motor fuels into vehicles.
So where's the location that is utilized for the purpose of primarily for dispensing motor fuel into the vehicles?
That is the fuel island canopy that has 5 multi-pump dispensers under it.
And in fact, that's the only area on this proposed site that actually dispenses motor fuel, is that right?
Dispenses motor fuel into vehicles.
Correct. So you can't have motor fuels not dispensed into vehicles in the convenience store, is that right?
That's correct.
And again, the only area for dispensing primarily for dispensing motor fuel is in the RC district.
That is correct.
So there's just one more on cross. I'll speak up. You can stay there because I'll be done. So you and I went through a number of functions, let's say, that that are provided from within the store so that the fuel dispensing in the RC district can occur. You recall that, of course.
Yes.
Would you agree that those functions that we went through and the facilities such as control panels and telecommunications equipment, employees, and those items that we listed, storage, those are essential to the operation of the fueling pumps?
They are essential in helping facilitate and assist the customers in the operation that they do at the fuel pumps.
Okay, so electrical panels with circuit breakers, are those to assist the customers in pumping fuel?
They are to make the pumps operable so that customers can utilize them.
Right. So without those, so you want to do it one by one? So a place where the employees work and can come out to assist the customers is essential to the operation of the fueling pumps. Is that true?
It's essential to those who need additional assistance.
Okay. Well, you said you're obligated by law to provide it, right?
I believe we are obligated by law to provide assistance with the fueling operation, yes.
And you said that there are over 200 and some sheets, right?
Yes, over 200 sheets in Pennsylvania.
Right. Are you developing any that don't have buildings associated with them? Just fueling pumps and canopies?
No.
Okay. That would be crazy, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be your business model, right? I withdraw that question. It's the kind of question you ask at this hour. I'll try not to do that. So the dumpster, isn't that essential to the proper operation of the fueling pumps and the other services provided at the pumps?
Could you say that again, please?
Sure. Isn't some on-site waste disposal location, a dumpster, isn't that essential to providing the fueling stations that you provide, which, as you described, have waste receptacles?
That is an additional service, a convenience item provided to our customers at the pumps. We have waste receptacles around the site that also could be used by customers, but being at the pumps, those are convenience items for those customers.
Well, we'll go through this again. When those get filled up, you have to dispose of them somewhere.
That's correct.
All right. So isn't it essential that you have a place to dispose of all of those bags of trash that come out of those waste receptacles?
Yes. It's only environmentally sound to do so.
Sure. The pump controls, which are within the building, aren't those essential to the operation of the fueling pumps?
The pump controls are actually underneath the fuel island canopy at the pumps themselves. The electrical services, breakers, are within the building in the mechanical room.
But an employee, if they spot a problem from within the building, can shut the pump down, right?
An employee can shut down the pumps as well as a customer.
But we're talking about an employee from within the building.
That's correct.
They can shut down the pump.
Yes.
And that's essential to the operation of the fuel pumps, isn't it?
That's a safety measure.
Safety is or is not essential?
It's essential, yes.
Thank you. How about the telecommunication facilities that are used for your billing system at the pumps?
I don't know anything about that system, so I can't comment on it.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have.
Anything else for this witness? Thank you. Mr. Ferguson?
Yeah, I wanted to call Mr. Leonard. Mr. Leonard, we may have to put up the display, but I'll try to avoid that just for the sake of time. Are you suggesting to everyone here that the display that you put up there reflected current lighting conditions?
We didn't do anything for current lighting conditions.
Okay. So essentially what you showed is, so when you turn down the sheets lights You could be in the middle of a potato patch somewhere out in the middle of Idaho, and it's completely dark, because there is no other ambient light that is part of your display. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's the only way to accurately describe and show what the lighting from the particular site creates. It's the only way.
Didn't you testify that the canopy lights are, to some extent, self-regulating? So, for example, they are not.
No.
So, are the canopy lights, are they shining at the same brightness in the middle of the day as they are at midnight?
I would assume that the lighting is not on during the day.
I'm not asking you to assume anything, sir.
Lighting is not on during the day.
There is no lighting during the day. Okay, at dusk, then.
No, there's no lighting from those lights.
So during the day, if I went to a Sheetz, the lights would be off in the canopy at this Sheetz.
Most likely, yes.
So maybe, maybe not. You don't know. You design the lights, but you don't know if they're off during the day.
Well, if an employee turned them on, they're going to be on.
Well, I'm not talking about by accident. I'm talking about what you designed.
No, they're not going to be on.
They're not going to be on. Okay. When do they come on?
It depends on how they're run.
Okay. Why don't you tell us how they're run so the board knows when
That's-
they come on?
I can't tell you that. I don't know how they control that.
Who's
All
they?
Sheets.
You don't know.
No, I don't sell the controller.
Okay, all right. So, so they could put controllers on them that, for example, at dusk, where you have some ambient light, they come on at a certain level, and then perhaps as it gets darker and darker, you know, the lights may actually could be controlled to diminish. Have you ever seen an application like that?
To where lights dim down as it gets darker?
Yes.
No, sir.
Okay. Have you seen any light controls which are regulated by the ambient levels of light?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does Sheetz typically have their lights come on using a device that would have them come on? So, for example, let's say it's noon, but there's a storm and it's very dark. In your experience with working with Sheetz, does an employee have to remember to turn the lights on, or is there some automatic device that turns them on?
I can't answer that. I'm not part of that.
Okay. So to the extent that so you just provide light studies. You just study the light.
No, we provide the lighting equipment.
Okay.
So the lights themselves.
Okay. So the controls which cause the lights to go on and off, that's not lighting equipment that you provide?
That is correct.
Okay. Are you generally a lighting contractor?
We are a lighting contractor, yes.
Do you hire others to install those switches that cause the lights to go on and off?
We do not.
Okay. You just put the lights in. How do you know if they work?
First of all, we have another business that is a contractor. So we assure that they come on and off if we are installing them.
Okay. Oh, sure. You good? All right. Have you been to the location of this proposed Sheetz development at night?
I have.
Okay. Would you say that the absence of any other light that was reflected in your model was accurate?
One more time on the question?
Your model seemed to show the non-existence of any other light sources other than the occasional car driving by. Is that what you observed?
No.
All right. The aerial view is optimal, is it not? And wouldn't you agree that if anyone were looking at these lights from an elevation that is under the canopy or lower than the canopy, their experience would be that the lights would be significantly brighter than what they would see from looking above the canopy?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
All right. What is the elevation of the canopy, or the lights? Do you know what that is?
Yes, it's 16 feet.
16 feet, okay. And do you do anything to study what the experience of persons in cars or in their homes or pedestrians or in their yards, what their experience is going to be if they're not at a level which is as high as 16 feet and they're really looking right into the lights? Is that part of your study?
Yes.
Okay. Did you demonstrate that? I didn't see any demonstration of that anywhere in your...
We went into the property that she directed us to go to. So, yes, we did. And we turned and looked right back at the site.
Right. And that was blocked by deciduous trees.
I'm not sure what it was blocked by. I would tell you that the fixtures have back shields on them. So by the design of the fixture itself, it is designed to throw or distribute the light forward of the pole and of the fixture, of the ambient fixture.
Okay. Do you ever do these displays showing, what it would look like in wintertime?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Do you have that for us?
Not in this one, no, sir.
Okay. And so, assuming that you developed this canopy with the lights just as you described them, at what distance could I see that illuminated canopy? Do you know?
I would assume it depends on your elevation.
Well, let's assume that I'm level with the pumps. How far away can I see the lights of the canopy?
Well,
Assume it's all level.
So the fixtures that are specified are all recessed fixtures with a distribution of 60 degrees, which means if you are perpendicular to the ground, you take a 60-degree angle. So if you were outside of that viewing area, you would not be able to see that fixture.
So it would just be blackness. So if I were, say I walk down the road 20 feet, right, out of this illuminated canopy, I just see blackness because I was outside of that angle. Is that what you're saying?
If your question is, are you going to see glare, the answer is no.
I'm just asking if you would see an illuminated canopy. How far, from what distance?
It depends on if they're what is illuminated on the canopy. I mean,
I'm talking about the model that you showed us.
You asked me if I would be able to see the lights. If I was outside of that 60-degree nadir point, it would be very difficult.
So it would just be blackness.
It would be very dark.
Okay, so that 60-degree angle.
I don't know if it would be blackness.
Okay, so that 60-degree angle doesn't leave the site of the property.
Photometry does not leave the side of the property.
Okay, so someone coming north on Perry Highway, they're not likely to see that Sheetz store until they're right up on it. Is that your testimony here?
No, it's not.
Okay, let's suppose Perry Highway was.
Well, if you looked at the actual software, you saw that the facade on the canopy. So.
Yeah, I'm just asking you. So, at what distance do you think that can be seen?
Sir, I can't tell you. I don't know.
Okay. Did you develop the Sheetz, which is located on Mount Nebo Road?
Very likely.
Oh, doesn't sound like you're familiar with it.
I very likely, because I have 11 designers that do that.
Okay. So, but in your experience, how many of these have you provided the lighting design for? How many sheets?
More than 500. Because,
more than 500?
Yes.
So, so if a Sheetz is on a highway and it's level, how far from that Sheetz can you begin seeing the lights?
We would not use the same optic. If you were on a highway, you would not use the same optic as you do in a situation like this.
What's the name of the road that this is on?
McCandless.
No, the name of the road. It's what?
Assuming Perry Highway.
Right.
McCandless.
Okay, a comparable road.
No, this has controls to it. We designed into this a specific optic to overcome the residential community and parcels that are on the nearby.
Okay.
That we would not use that on an expressway.
I didn't say
or some way
expressway.
populated.
This is on a highway. I asked about a
So
highway.
these are specific.
All right. And I asked about this model and this design.
It's specific.
I didn't
Yes,
ask
sir.
if it was specific. So let me ask you this. Do you know, within a reasonable degree of certainty in your profession of designing lighting, can you inform this board, if you were on a comparable road with this design, how far away could you begin seeing the lights of this Sheetz? Unobstructed.
I can't, first of all, I can't honestly tell you, because it depends on the elevation, which is what I
I said
shared
level
with you.
already, so that
Level
solves
with
your
what?
elevation
Level
issue.
with what?
We already did this.
I mean, the amount of things that he's adding into this that he's supposed to
Nope.
suppose or pretend is out there.
It's the same question, same question. I said at the level of the
All these
pumps.
Conditions that clearly, you're asking him to go ahead and anticipate something that's not before him and it's not
I
relevant.
think if you did 500 of these, you might know the answer, like how far away you could see these
Mr.
canopies.
Ferguson, I
all
think,
different.
I think he's testified that he can't. I mean, wait.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it just went off.
I mean,
That's a sign.
Okay,
I think
we'll
council
leave it at that. I'm not going to get that answer.
And council understands, we understand the question.
All right, thank you. Okay, that's all the questions I had.
Just a couple very quick.
All right, I think you'll get suddenly more knowledgeable about it.
But, Mr. Wood, we do have one more, Mr. Zandier.
I'm sorry, yes, that's true. There's,
Mr. Zandier, or,
Had a traffic, safety traffic question.
okay, so, not yet. No, Brian, you can finish your,
you have one more right there as well? Is there another one?
Ms. Crawford.
Ms. Crawford's not here, I'm taking care of her, she left, she's a grandparent, am I allowed to speak on her behalf or not?
You cannot, no.
Am I done? Or
I
some-
don't know yet. No, I think Mr. Wood has a couple questions for you. Just a couple, I think, though.
Oh, we'll keep it to a minimum here. You can't tell a lawyer just a couple. So for the purpose of, there was some discussion with respect to off-site lighting not being shown on your plan, is that correct?
Yes,
So you've created photometric plans, right?
yes,
And that modeling that we saw today is actually modeled off of the photometric plan for this site, is that right?
yes, yes.
And when you do a photometric plan, you also don't depict off-site lighting, is that right?
Never.
And
Can't.
that's the only way you can tell the actual intensity of the proposed lighting on the plan.
Correct.
And in addition, that's how you show conformity with what's required under zoning ordinances.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
photometric plans also don't take into consideration landscaping, is that right?
No,
So oftentimes, it may show greater light levels at a property line than actually would occur when the landscaping is taken into consideration.
absolutely.
And so the photometric plan that was submitted here also didn't take into consideration all the landscaping that's being submitted, or being presented in the RC district, is that
The
right?
answer to that is no.
So there's also discussion on different types of lighting. If you're on a highway, can you go ahead and identify what you would consider to be a highway?
Well, a heavily traveled expressway with multiple vehicles continuously.
So and by continuous, you mean there's no stop signs or
Correct.
signalization.
Correct.
And so would you consider a roadway that has 40-mile-an-hour speed limits and significant signalization, would you consider that a highway for the purpose of what we were
Absolutely not.
discussing? Let me just wait till I finish.
Absolutely not.
And so, in comparison to the continuous, nonstop, high speed, the lighting would be significantly different than what's being proposed at this facility. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And regardless of the 4-lane road that's sitting out front, the lighting constraints were focused upon any of the residential uses in the area. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And the goal of the lighting plan here was to go ahead and minimize or eliminate any impact on those sites. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And just for the clarification on the record, there were, do you recall showing a view on your program from the corner of Montclair and Perry Highway,
Yes, I do.
looking back into the site?
Yes, I do.
And that actually would have depicted what you would see if you were traveling down Perry Highway in terms of lighting coming from the canopy, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And again, all of that lighting was shielded, so you would not actually visibly see the bulb.
Correct.
Okay, nothing further.
I do have a question. I don't know. I think you said, and I'm not good at saying what you said like you all are good at saying what you said, but you said something like, well, we don't really take into the landscaping into the lighting. But when I asked to see from that residential area, the whole reason I couldn't see the light from the sheets was because of the shrubs that were there. So should we have seen what it would look like with no shrubs there?
So what I was referring to was a photometric plan, which was not what was shown there. So the photometric is an overhead that sort of shows the illumination at certain points along the property itself. So his plan, though, separately is able to take that illumination, but then also does, and correct me if I'm wrong, takes into consideration in the landscaping plan that's also proposed. So it has the lighting levels that come from the photometric plan, but then also can incorporate the landscaping. So that's where it varies from what a specific photometric plan would show. Is that an accurate description?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sure you say it better than me.
Can I just ask, did you, when you did your virtual display here, were you the one who put in the landscaping and the berms?
My company did.
Okay. So before presenting this here tonight, you could have, and I presume you did, sort of put the view at the Gronsky's driveway or any one of those people, and then just raise the bank and move the trees to make sure that when this question was asked, it would be obstructed.
We absolutely,
It would be, I didn't hear you.
It would be obstructed. You
Absolute-
could do that. You
we
could do that.
absolutely unequivocally did not do that.
Okay, you could do that.
I'm not going to answer that.
He's already answered the question.
Well, I want to know if it's possible. So, for example, the
Mr.
details of the
Ferguson,
landscaping
Mr. Ferguson,
plan.
He testified he did not do that, so whether or not he's capable of doing that, I mean, what more why do we need to hear that?
Well, the landscaping design could have been provided by Sheets, and he just put it into the program.
Right. And I think you made that point, but, you know,
That was a question, but okay, that's what I wanted to know. All right, that's all I have.
Mr. Ferguson, next witness.
Okay, Mr. Wooster. So you did a traffic impact study, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did that include traffic generated by the convenience store in addition to traffic that would be generated by fueling pumps alone?
Yes.
Now, have you submitted your traffic study as part of this your traffic impact study as part of the application? Do you know whether it has been submitted?
I don't know if it's been submitted as part of the conditional use application. It's been submitted to the town of McCandless.
Okay. And does that traffic impact study segregate traffic generated just by the fuel service as distinguished from traffic generated by the convenience store?
It does not.
Okay. Why?
Because the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and the town of McCandless require me to look at the entire site, which is what I did. My traffic study was not prepared specifically for this conditional use hearing to segregate those amounts of traffic.
Okay. So
Could I do that? Yes.
Okay. So by the entire site, your study here included 131 Montclair.
It included the original site plan, yes.
Okay.
It was prepared not for this purpose.
Okay. So when you determined the traffic, you had to project traffic counts, did you not, for this proposed gas station use, because this particular gas station use is not in existence, is that correct?
Restate the question?
Sure. So because you can't count vehicles going to and from this proposed gas station use, you had to project the number of vehicles that the use would generate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you project it by referring to grids or tables that are reliable, that project the number of vehicles that such uses have, or did you do it by perhaps studying comparable facilities, or perhaps both?
Yes,
Both. Is that what you're saying?
all of the above, yes.
All of the above, okay. And when you look at, for example, PennDOT's tables from which you can use in order to aid you in projecting a volume of traffic, is there a separate gas station or fueling station use that does not include a convenience store component?
Well, maybe I can correct something instead of going around and around.
Sure.
PennDOT doesn't have tables. PennDOT doesn't do this.
Okay.
The source we used is the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, which is the industry standard. PennDOT requests that we use that standard. It's not PennDOT's standard, or PennDOT's tables.
Okay.
So it's ITE standards.
Okay. All right, so I'm corrected on the source of those standards.
Right.
Within those standards, is there a separate fueling station or gas station use that does not include a convenience store component?
There are.
Okay. Did you look at those separately to assist you in separating the convenience store traffic generation from the fuel service?
I've already testified that I did not segregate them.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right. And when the model that you showed us that looked like a video, is that a program called Synchro?
It is. Sim traffic from Synchro.
Syn traffic from
Sim
Synchro.
traffic.
Okay, so it's like Frigidaire and,
Sure.
all right.
Not really.
All right, and were both of those models considered to be peak traffic times?
They were. I testified that that was the evening peak street traffic hour comparison between existing 2017 conditions, the time the report was prepared, and proposed 2024 conditions with development
Okay,
of the entire site.
okay. And do you recall the peak traffic generation that you that you relied upon for this proposed development?
I don't have that number in my head. I could certainly get it for you.
Okay. So my clients have concerns about entering and exiting Montclair, where they live. Currently, how many lanes of traffic run perpendicular to Montclair on Perry Highway?
4.
Okay. Post-construction, post-improvements that you've described, how many lanes will there be?
Directly in front of Montclair,
Yes.
4 with a taper area.
A taper area which will be to the north or the south of the Montclair intersection?
It'd be tapering through the intersection, starting at approximately Montclair and running to the south.
Okay. So what's the purpose of the taper?
To segregate in advance traffic to shadow left-turning vehicles.
Okay. And will the taper simply be a non-elevated painted surface?
That's correct.
Okay. And did you, how did you calculate, what calculations did you make with regard to the queuing at the intersection in terms of coming back onto Montclair? Queuing back to Montclair to make the right in?
Traffic currently backs, maximum back of queue in existing condition backs beyond Montclair. That condition will not be considerably exacerbated in the forecasted condition.
But exacerbated?
Very slightly, less than car length.
It'll be worse.
I wouldn't call it worse. It'd be almost imperceptible.
Okay.
You saw the model. I don't know if you noticed any significant difference. I'm sure you were studying the model while you were there.
You know, since you asked, and maybe others are wondering too, it seemed that there was, with all of the traffic that was shown in the model, and it was at a high rate of speed.
It was faster than
Because-
real time. That's
Yeah, it
correct.
was faster than real time. There was rarely a vehicle that went either to Montclair or to the driveway, the driveway A, as you call it. It seemed like there was rarely a vehicle. And is that because of that's just a percentage of the overall traffic, and that's why it seemed that there's virtually never a car coming out of there? Or going to, accessing the property?
I think when you talk about trip generation being split between several driveways, and in the time period you're looking at, if a car comes once a minute, that's 60 cars. Sounds like a lot. But if I waited and didn't talk to you for 60 seconds, you would become annoyed. So I think what happens is when you talk about a car, so if a car comes every 30 seconds, that's 120 cars. And still, that's a long time between cars. And so you were looking at several minutes. So when people hear the volume of cars, it sounds like a lot. But when you put it in average per minute or average per second, it's not as much as you might think. And I think that's the perception you were having watching the plan.
Will you be proposing any new controls on entering or exiting Montclair from Perry Highway?
No, the traffic control, which is a stop sign control on Montclair as it approaches Perry Highway, remains unchanged.
Okay, and by control, I meant signage also, not just signalization, but any signage that would in any way.
At the intersection of Montclair and Perry Highway, no.
Okay. What about the intersection of the Montclair driveway to the site and Montclair?
There was discussion at previous meetings unrelated to this proceeding that discussed the possibility of adding signs to try to prohibit traffic from leaving the driveway B to Montclair and not turn left.
No decision's been made on that.
It wouldn't be something I would necessarily recommend. It is something that would be at best redundant because traffic generated by these facilities, it's generally 70% of it is already on the roadway. It's a convenience item going from one place to another, and it would go back to where it came from. So that type of sign would simply make it very, very difficult for somebody who lived on Montclair to patronize the Sheets and get back home without going back onto Perry Highway and making 2 left turns. Okay. So I think it would be an unnecessary sign. It could certainly be installed.
Mm-hmm. So if I understand your testimony about the program by Synchro, mm-hmm. That relative to the volumes of traffic on Perry Highway entering and exiting, the amount of traffic actually going in, say, driveway A, is relatively small.
Compared to the volumes on Perry Highway? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Is there any, will you require any permitting from the Federal Highway Administration in order to develop driveway A or driveway B?
No.
Okay. So is there any reason why this proposed development could not function adequately without driveway B?
From what standpoint?
Traffic flow in and out of the site.
Convenient traffic circulation, driveway B is important. From sheer numbers, could everything be accommodated in one location? Physically, yes. But I kind of that equivalent to, can you have one door into a house? Yes. Can you have one entrance for a residential community for 100 homes into a subdivision? Yes. There's generally call for 2. And so I see it as a necessity for site design.
Okay. But
from a sheer traffic capacity standpoint, no.
Nothing further. Thanks.
Mr. Zandier, I think it is your time. Wherever you're comfortable. I guess over by the podium there, if you could. We'll let Mr. Worcester camp out there up front.
Okay, traffic safety related, right? Based on the slides that I saw with your program running, to make the site safe throughout this process, would it take 6 years?
No.
But the dates went from like 2017 to 2024. I mean, it represents a 6-year time span. Is it going to take 6 years to create this safe environment that your study talks about?
No.
So does your study, if I was looking at it correctly, are you adding a lane? A turning lane?
We're adding 2 turning lanes, north and southbound.
North and southbound. So does that mean you have to widen the highway?
Yes.
So it's going to be less than 6 years, and you're going to widen this whole corridor that's currently a 4-lane to 5 lanes.
As depicted on our plan, yes.
And are you, maybe you're not the right guy, but are you familiar with the topography in that where you're adding that?
Yes, we've
Lane?
designed the lane.
But I mean, there isn't any room.
It requires construction.
So you'll have to widen the highway.
That's what I said, yes.
Okay,
We have to widen the highway.
all right.
It doesn't take 6 years.
No further questions.
Mr. Wotus, anything left for redirect?
for Mr. Worcester.
All right. Mr. Ferguson.
Okay, so just a couple for. No, not for him.
I just want to make sure. All right, I know you're coming back up for the shock. I'm like, wait, this is.
I'm not an idiot.
I'm not applying.
No, anybody who cross-examine him should be questioned. All right, I don't remember his name. HD? HC, thank you. All right, I'm sorry I forgot your last name, sir. Okay.
Henry Phones, Fownes.
Okay. So, Mr. Phones, the property now is owned by, I'm sorry, be clear here. 8607 Perry Highway is currently owned by whom?
I don't know all the owners and addresses. This was assembled by a developer.
This was what?
Assembled by a developer. So I don't know specific, I'd have to look at a drawing with the property owners on it. and
Let me show you this document that you introduced, reporting to you from the property owners. Does that help to refresh your recollection?
I thought you were talking about the new store.
No.
I'm sorry.
Sorry about
Go
that.
ahead. No, yeah, that's what I thought you were.
I gave you this one, but they're very similar, so. All right, so the owner of the existing sheets is?
Menard. Peter and Janice Menard.
Now, Sheets currently has a lease with the Menards, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Excuse me, 1 second. So, do you know whether the Menards have applied for a zoning permit for a change of use, or whether they intend to apply for a zoning permit for a change of use for their property at 8607 Perry Highway?
I'm going to object. I don't see how that's relevant for the purpose of this application, which relates to a property adjacent to it in the RC district for a service station.
I guess if you hadn't brought it up, it wouldn't be relevant.
I think Mr. Phones, I'm guessing I know what Mr. Phones' answer is going to be, but I think you can go ahead and answer the question, understanding.
Wait a minute, you're answering now? I mean, do you know the answer to the question?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Did you hear your attorney say that the answer was no?
No, I did not hear him say it was
Okay.
no.
Do you know whether or not Mr. and Mrs. Menard intend to apply for a zoning permit to change the use of the property?
I do not.
Okay. Did you have anything to do with requesting this letter from Mr. and Mrs. Menard?
Yes.
You did. Did you draft this letter?
No.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
Anything from Mr. Zandier? All right, Mr. Wotus, any?
Nothing.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson?
I don't have any more witnesses on their side, but I do have a witness to call.
Understood, yes, we just
All
want to
right.
make, we want to make sure that we're done with that aspect of the
Okay,
hearing.
as long-
We did have from the EPA man.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, I wasn't gonna ask him any questions, so.
Can I?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
You're running this meeting.
I'm sorry, I couldn't remember your name, sir. So many names. Everyone knows. Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Cutshall. The one question,
Matthew J. Cutshall, Cutshall. That's okay.
someone asked someone else, but they didn't know the answer, if the tanks were 300 feet from a residence. Do you know that?
Ma'am, I do not design the layout of the store. I have no involvement with the placement of those tanks
Oh,
on the property.
Oh, okay. Who would know that? Who knows that? Who knows how far away those tanks are to the closest residence?
I don't think for the purpose of this hearing that there was an actual distance measured from the proposed tanks. Again, because that's not specifically related to the application itself. There was a question that was asked. I know that we did speak to Mr. Master Stefano, who said that calculation had not been completed. I don't believe any of the other witnesses that spoke this evening have the ability to speak to.
So nobody knows the answer to that.
I don't think that anyone on our side has the ability.
Do we not have a single scale drawing here and a scale that can be measured with?
And we could sit here for a while and pull out the site plan and go ahead through that.
You could do it while I'm
process.
doing my witness.
But you see why I'm asking.
Sure.
And that seems like it was kind of reasonable thing to want to know.
Perhaps while I'm doing my witness, they could get a scaled drawing and measure it with a scale.
I think no one had prepared that is basically what my answer is at this point. I think that the individual that talked about the site design itself had previously testified that calculation had not been made yet.
Okay, because I would like to know that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you would know that. I apologize.
That's okay.
So Mr. Wotus, is that the close of your case officially?
We have no further witnesses.
And Mr. Ferguson has no further cross-examination, so we will move on now to the next step.
This is the objector's presentation of their case.
Okay. I'd like to call Michael Wetzel. Okay.
Mr. Wetzel, you were sworn in already?
Yes, I was.
Would you mind just stating your name and tell us by whom you're employed?
My name is Michael Wetzel, W-E-T-Z-E-L. I'm with the firm Victor Wetzel Associates.
Could you use the
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Michael Wetzel. I'm a partner of the firm Victor Wetzel Associates. We're landscape architects and land planners.
And what are your qualifications?
I've been studying land development work with the firm I'm currently with for the last 27 years.
Okay. Could you give us some of your relevant experience to the assignment that you had that brings you here this evening?
A lot of the situations in regard to land development looking at zoning regulations, looking at sites. That's typical in regard to land development work. That's typical through the work that we've done for over 27 years that I have with not only Stephen Victor Associates, but Victor Wetzel Associates.
Okay. Are you a landscape architect?
No.
Okay. Did you have were you asked to review the application that was submitted to the town of McCandless? It's the subject of this meeting tonight, and to evaluate its compliance with the specific criteria for the conditional use for which they're applying?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Could you tell us what your findings were?
Well, first off, in looking at the entire site, we looked at the site in regard to the overall site plan. From the standpoint of, once again, the overall site, we found a lot of deficiencies, especially in the landscape buffers associated with 131 Montclair Avenue, especially along the Montclair Avenue side, which is the south part of the property, and also the eastern property line up against the R2 zoning district.
Okay. You were here earlier when when David testified, were you not?
Yes.
And he stated that he regarded 131 Montclair's rear yard as the rear yard for this application that's before us tonight.
Yes.
Okay. And did you review their addendum to their application? The addendum to the application for the conditional use this evening?
Well, as we looked at the application, it's really separated between the 3 lots associated more on Perry Highway and then separated by 131 Montclair Avenue. So what we look at is the sites in regard to the conditional use in the 3 lots and looking at the front yards, side yards, and rear yards of
Okay.
those 3 lots.
And what did you find with regard to the compliance with the specific criteria of the zoning ordinance as it relates, if we were to do as we've been asked to do this evening, which is to isolate that analysis to the 3 properties along Perry Highway?
Well, when we look at the RC zoning district associated with those 3 properties, you have a front yard depth of 35 feet. That's located off of Perry Highway. You have a 20-foot side yard located on the both sides of the site on Montclair side and also the northern part of the site. And then you also have a rear yard depth minimum setback of 100 feet, which under this situation, under those 3 lots, the 100-foot setback line would occur off of the rear of those lots that are facing Perry Highway.
Okay. And did you reach an opinion as to whether or not the canopy is located within the buildable area of the lot?
No, when you measure back from that rear lot line, 100 feet, not only is the canopy within that 100-foot rear yard section, but also really the front elevation of the existing building or proposed building.
So if we just look at the RC zoned properties along Perry Highway, does the ordinance set forth buffer yard requirements for those parcels?
Yes, off of the RC, yes, that does require buffer yard requirements.
Okay. Is there a rear yard, buffer yard requirement for parcels in the RC zoning district?
When you look at the buffer yard requirements, adjacent to any residential district and street right-of-ways and abutting, you have a buffer yard G associated with that.
Okay, but I'm talking about the commercial to commercial dividing line between 131 Montclair and the 3 parcels on Perry Avenue.
There is no buffer yards between those 2 areas.
Right. Is one required?
None.
There's none required?
Correct.
At the rear yard?
Off of that rear yard, there's no buffer. There's a building setback.
Okay. And what about the buffers along the side and front yard?
Yes, you do have the required, oops, I'm sorry, maybe I was looking at the wrong section there. You do have the side yards buffers that were presented as the buffer yard Cs through that section. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Did you have occasion to? So the thing that makes us struggle is because when you read their application, it describes all the buffer yards, but they're on 131 Montclair. So we were prepared to discuss those, but if those are not relevant,
Is this questioning or is he going to testify?
I think maybe say that for your closing.
look, it's by way of explanation. Mr. Wetzel came here this evening with a report which discusses and is responsive to the application filed by these applicants.
And I think you can ask that question.
I wasn't done. And so we're a little bit off the game here because, their application is unfortunately still in the record. And in their application, when they walk through the criteria of the conditional use, they refer to 131 Montclair as how they're complying with it. So we're sort of on a tightrope as to whether or not to refute what's before you in their application, in which they rely so heavily upon 131 Montclair, or to know whether or not council's going to disregard any of their representations with regard to compliance of the specific criteria for 131, for the RC zone properties, and disregard what they've said about 131 Montclair.
I think you're going to need to pick an approach, Mr. Ferguson, and ask the witness questions so that you can elicit whatever testimony
Well,
you want.
like I said, so if I go into 131 all right, let's do that. Okay, so So I'd like to direct your attention to the addendum to zoning application submitted by the applicant here this evening. I'm going down the statement of compliance. They represent gross lot area, 30,000 square feet minimum is the requirement. You agree with that, do you not?
Yes.
Okay. What did they say was the lot area for the proposed service station use?
I believe it was, I believe,
You should be able to read it.
oops.
Reading your report.
Oh, that's right. Under their amendment of the zoning, it was lot area for the proposed service station use is approximately 73,180.8 square feet, or
Right.
1.6 acres.
And you heard David's testimony tonight, did you not?
Yes.
And you heard what he said. There was how they met the 30,000 square foot requirement. Do you recall what he testified was the square footage for the service station?
I believe it was 0.87 acres,
Do you know how many square feet that is?
37,000 square feet approximately.
Okay. So in their application, they're representing it 73,000. Do you know what the difference is between David's testimony tonight that the lot area for the proposed service station was 73,189.80 square feet?
Yes, so you have a difference there of about 0.8 acres difference.
And do you know where that came from?
I would assume, it would say the rear 131 lot, Montclair Avenue.
Okay. Now, the plan, which they showed here tonight, wait a minute. So, on their application, did Sheets make representations as to the applicable buffer yards?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, they did.
Okay, before we get to that, I'm sorry, a little bit ahead of myself. Okay. So, I'm going to, I believe it's the second page of their addendum to the application. It says, applicant proposes to develop the property with 38 on-site parking stalls for the service station use. Right? So in the RC district, did you count the stalls there?
There was 12 spaces.
Okay. Now, in the next sentence, they say, a rear yard buffer shall be provided along residential property in connection with this conditional use application, which they insist is only with regard to RC. Now, does any portion of the RC zone site abut residentially zoned property?
No, it does not.
All right. So going on with what Sheets said. A rear yard buffer shall be provided along residential property in accordance with section 1314.04 buffer yard H. So let's just go with their reasoning. Is H the correct buffer yard?
No, it's not.
Could you explain why?
You have a requirement of a buffer yard G as outlined, and I'll go to this particular section. Under the HC Highway Commercial District, Article 1331.01E, buffer yards adjacent to residential districts and streets, right-of-ways abutting these districts shall be a buffer yard G.
All right. And does buffer yard G require some form of physical barrier? If your buffer yard, as shown on their plan, is 15 feet in depth, is there a physical barrier required to be constructed?
Correct. Under their plans, they do require a what's considered a wall.
Okay. And what is the height of that wall?
8 feet.
Okay. I want to show you the buffer yard G section. Okay. 15 feet. And it
Yep.
says other is F3, right?
Correct.
What's the height of F3?
F3 is a 8-foot masonry wrought iron fence wall.
F3.
Oh, F3. F3 is a 6 foot.
All right, a wrought iron and masonry structure.
Yes.
Does the plan propose a 6-foot-tall wrought iron and masonry structure?
No, technically it requires really the F8, F4, the 8-foot. The F4 8-foot high wall, not the 6-foot wall.
Okay, and why is that?
Under, once again, the buffer yards that I quoted, and through the buffer yard requirements, under a 15-foot buffer yard with a buffer yard G, there's requirements for canopy trees, understory trees, shrubs, evergreens, and others, except along streets, which is a F3.
Okay. And so, on what portions
Oh,
of the,
I'm sorry, F3, correct.
okay. On what portions of the site should the buffer yard G be shown?
That should be shown against residential streets, or all streets, and any part of the property has frontage on residential zoning districts.
So, are there applicable residential streets?
Yes, Montclair.
Okay. All right, and then the next sentence in their application says, side yard buffer shall be furnished in accordance with section 1314.04, buffer yard C. Is that correct?
Is correct, except for at A should be along the northern property line.
Okay. Okay. Were there any other items that, of non-compliance that you observed that we have not yet discussed?
It's really mostly in regard to the buffer yards that we just talked about along the southern property line and the eastern property line.
On behalf of the numerous residents of Montclair that we represent, were you asked to develop some recommended conditions should council approve this conditional use application?
Yes, we have provided a sketch and reviewed it with the residents that we're representing about making some slight changes to the overall site plan in relationship of especially the 131 site location. Mostly in regard to adding the required fencing associated with the site. If you look along the eastern property line, they use a term that the existing vegetation satisfies the requirements. It's part of an exhibit that we will supply. Most of the existing vegetation that's along that eastern property line does not satisfy the requirements. They're only very small saplings of trees, 1 inch or less. There are a few larger trees, but no evergreens. And the height of their parking lot, especially along the eastern property line, is at the height of the bedroom of the adjacent of the property adjacent to the site. So we feel that a proper wall should be added, as well as the proper requirements for landscaping should be followed for the buffer yard G associated with those two areas.
Okay, did you have further recommendations?
Well, once again, if we're looking at following the RC zoning district, and you have the requirement of the 100-foot rear yard setback, that should be followed. But we also have a situation that that probably the Montclair Drive connection be removed from the plan, just because of the traffic, but really the lights and the additional traffic that's happening on Montclair, to remove that access and really adding a sidewalk on that area. That way, people leaving the site or entering the site off of driveway B, what's not really necessarily shown in their site study is the amount of headlights that are going to the residential zoning district and those existing homes in that location. So we feel that it's best to remove the Montclair Drive access to the site for the sheets.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for Mr. Wetzel.
Mike, before I begin, do you have a copy of your report that I can have?
Yes, we have several. We have a report for yourself, photographer, as well as council.
That's not mine. It would be his exhibit.
Exhibit 1.
This is the first one.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike, did you, oh, I'm sorry. I just keep messing with you. Are we ready now? Sorry. Okay. So, Mike, did you personally review the submission that had been filed by Sheets for this conditional use application?
Looking at what was done in regard to the amended zoning application, as well as some of the exhibits that are included in your package, which highlight the buffer yard requirements and I'll say the site plan that was submitted, yes.
And I'm asking you specifically reviewed
Yes.
these, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you reviewed, obviously, and the submissions that had been made follow the plans that had been provided today as part of the Sheets presentation. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
So you ultimately, you had an opportunity to review those prior to coming here tonight.
Yes.
So, in fact, when there was at least testimony made that you guys had to, meaning the objectors had to change your approach based upon the site plans that were provided, that wasn't true, is that right?
State that again, please.
Your counsel indicated,
What
I'm going to question him on it either way.
Well,
You made a
I
statement
think
saying that we
Mr.
changed our
Gavin said
plan.
you have a decision to make, and we made the decision to proceed with this report.
All I'm questioning is on something that you previously had stated. I think I have grounds to go ahead and ask him to verify. He had reviewed these plans. They're saying that they changed their plans tonight based upon what was presented. However, they indicated that they've seen these plans before. So it goes to basically the veracity of what the witness is testifying to here.
Well, I think the confusion is we're using plans in two different ways. We're talking about plans, which are the actual drawings submitted in connection with the application, and the plan that we made to present this. So the latter, how we were going to present this, we were feeling that we were trying to decide whether or not to proceed forward with the 131 Montclair stuff. Counsel, the solicitor suggested you better make a decision, and we did. So I hope the use of the term plans hasn't been too confusing.
Okay, well, you indicated you reviewed items that had been submitted previously by Sheets as part of this application.
Correct, and they're included in our exhibit.
Correct. So I would presume that you've been involved in other land development applications. Is that right?
Yes,
And you've represented both applicants in some instances and objectors like you are tonight.
yes,
And specifically, have you been involved in prior conditional use applications?
several, yes.
So you would agree then that conditional use applications are the first things that are presented for approval because you need a use approval before you move on to land development. Is that right?
Yes, you look at the site overall as well, but yes,
Correct. So subsequently to receiving a conditional use approval is traditionally when you would see a land development application be presented, in this instance, to council for their approval, correct?
yes.
And-
And based on the plans that you had submitted, that's what we also reviewed as a gross part of the overall site plan review.
So, and you, then as a part of that review, you also saw the subdivision plan that was submitted, the consolidation subdivision plan,
We did not
correct?
see this consolidation subdivision plan.
Okay.
We were not given that information.
Okay, so that was submitted, as testified to this evening as well. There was a consolidation plan and subdivision that was also submitted.
We did not see that in regard to tonight's presentation.
Okay, that had been presented, or not?
I'm gonna object. I don't recall any mention, and I've been listening very carefully for that. I don't recall any mention this evening whatsoever of any consolidation subdivision plans. And besides, it's not before council.
Well, the record, it's relevant for the purpose of this discussion, though. So you'd also indicated that you went ahead and looked at the zoning ordinance, you looked at these three properties, is that right? Meaning
Yes.
in the RC district, those three properties.
Correct.
So you went ahead and looked at, first you identified that there's a 35-foot front yard requirement associated with these properties in the RC district, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you confirmed that the plan complies with that one, is that right?
35-foot front yard, yes.
And what was the side yard?
20 feet.
So, and you also confirmed that the 20-foot side yard complies in terms of what was presented as part of our site plan.
Yes.
So let's talk about there was some discussion here on buffer yards that are required.
Yes.
There may have been some confusion. At some point, initially you'd indicated that there's the rear buffer yard in an RC is a G buffer yard, is that right?
Correct. Your application states that it's a buffer yard H, but the zoning ordinance requires a buffer yard G.
Okay, so in preparation for this evening, you indicated you had reviewed the zoning ordinance as well, is that right?
Yes.
Do you have a copy in front of you, or do you have the provisions of the RC district?
Yes, under the RC, yes.
And so you would agree that there are specific standards that are related to the conditional use itself, is that right?
Yes.
And those are the conditions that ultimately are what's before the council tonight for determining whether or not the applicant has complied or not, is that right?
Correct, yes.
So there's a few different ones that are in here, obviously. And maybe, although you testified a little bit out of order in terms of several of those items, maybe it's easiest just to walk through them. So starting with gross lot area. There's a requirement that there's 30,000 square feet, is that right?
Under the RC provision, yes.
Correct? And you had also, I believe, testified that there was a statement today or that identified that the RC district was approximately 37,000 square feet and change, is that right?
Yes,
So you would agree that that complies with that criteria?
yes.
The next talked about parking stalls. So in terms of the plan, you obviously had an opportunity to review the plan. Did you have an opportunity to review the plan with respect to the lot line or the zoning line as it separates the parcel?
Between the three lots that front, we'll say Perry Highway and the rear parcel of 131, yes.
Correct, and similar where the zoning boundary runs between the RC and the
Yes.
C3.
It goes partially through the proposed New Sheets building.
Did you have an opportunity to count the number of parking stalls that were located in the RC district?
Going by testimony, I have not counted prior, but looking at it here. Um, 11 parking stalls.
Okay, I think that the testimony might have been 12, but if you wouldn't mind just recounting.
He's probably missing the one to the right of the parking, all the way over one.
I'm still, unless it's hidden by the stormwater detention, I'm still getting.
You're looking at?
I'm going, let's count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, 12.
And you
And I did say 12 in earlier presentations as well.
Okay. And you would also, you were also present during the Sheets presentation, correct?
Yes,
And at that time, you heard that the maximum peak hour employees or number of employees on the facility would be anywhere between 6 and 8, is that right?
yes.
And so let's look at what is required in the RC district for parking. So it provides required parking shall be sufficient to accommodate the maximum number of employees and the number of cars which are normally left for repair or for service. So you would agree that 12 parking stalls is obviously greater than 8, and so that would accommodate the peak number of employees on the facility at any time. Is that right?
Yes.
And you also heard that there wouldn't be any cars left for repair or for service, right?
Correct, yes.
So the application with respect to the 12 parking stalls complies with what the requirements in the RC district.
Yes.
Moving down is the rear buffer yard. So it provides a rear yard buffer shall be provided along residential property in accordance with section 1314.04 buffer yard H. That was what was included in the application as well. Is that right?
I believe through this section, doesn't it say a buffer yard E? When it's up against a residential district.
Are you looking at 132811?
Oh, not 11, I'm looking at
So I'm looking at-
132805 buffer areas.
Okay, so we're looking at the conditional use standards here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I'll give you a moment to flip there.
Say that in what section?
It is 1328.11B subsection 1. it's entitled service station.
Yes.
Okay, so as you follow through it, we bypassed some of the initial saying what a service station is. We already hit gross lot area. We talked about required parking, and now the next one is, if you see where it starts, a rear buffer yard.
Yes, buffer yard H.
Okay, so that says specifically, though, a rear yard buffer shall be provided along residential property in accordance with section 131404 buffer yard H, right?
Correct, yes.
And the piece that is located to the rear of the RC, I'm sorry. And the piece, or the property. The property that's located to the rear of the RC zone property is zone C3, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you'd also, so you had talked about, though, a buffer yard G, is that right?
Correct, that's looking for the 131, or
But-
131, yeah, 131 Montclair lot.
But again, for the
RC.
purpose of, again, we talked about how conditional use, you're familiar with how conditional use applications work, correct? So what we're actually looking for here is there's specific criteria that's set forth in the ordinance that we either comply with or we don't comply with, right?
Yes.
So the provision you're relying on is not related to the actual conditional use application and the criteria set forth in section 132811B1, correct?
Correct, but in reviewing actually comments by the Township Zoning Officer, Mr. Beatty, he.
Well, I'm going to
gave-
object to that hearsay.
Well, no, under his initial presentation at the beginning of the night, he had 8 comments that he brought out to the board here tonight.
Okay.
Several of those include the overall site and additional landscaping, as well as loading times, so it included the entire site.
So, but what he was talking about were proposed conditions, right?
Yes.
He didn't talk about compliance with the criteria specifically, right?
Those are, yes, conditions that he is imposing.
Okay, so those are separate and distinct from the condition, the criteria set forth in the conditional use provision, right?
But they weren't necessarily just for the RC zoning site.
I understand, but if you could just answer my question, those are outside of the criteria in the zoning ordinance, right?
Yes.
And again, for the purpose of a conditional use is we either comply with this criteria or we don't comply. If we comply, we get our approval, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So again, for the scope of tonight's meeting, we're looking specifically at this criteria and whether or not we meet this conditional use criteria.
Yes.
Everything else is land development, which is not before this board tonight, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm looking at what you are calling as this is your review letter or
Comment, yes.
comment letter?
Yes.
So most of this, what's attached here, is there an actual narrative that lays out your position outside of what looks like to be the first page?
No, it's more supporting documents associated with the, of our review,
Okay.
and how we show a site plan of the recommendation changes, what we feel is that should occur along the buffer yards, and what happens in regard to the entrance B along Montclair and the removal of that.
So did you have an opportunity as well as part of your investigation to determine whether or not there's any existing gas station facilities that are currently operated located within 1,500 feet of this facility?
And the relevance of the question.
Talking about the criteria and whether or not we comply with
There
it.
is no criteria that talks about operating. That has been interjected in here. It's not in the ordinance.
distance from another gas station, which is a facility dispensing motor fuel into vehicles. If it's not dispensing motor fuel, then it's not a gas station.
The ordinance,
Guys,
sorry,
one at a time, please.
the ordinance does not include the criteria that it be operated.
That's a legal discussion. That's a legal discussion we'll have.
Question is misleading.
No.
It's gonna be up to council, you know, to make a determination on what the interpretation is of that particular provision. So I think we understand both of your positions on it.
Okay. I don't think I have anything further. Thanks for bearing with me since I just got this.
To a little redirect, I want to stand by him so we don't have to. Let's go back over the buffer yard requirements. As you see, the applicant relies upon section 1314.04 for a requirement of a buffer yard H. That's what it says in their application, right?
Yes.
So if you go to 1314.04, there's no actual buffer yard requirement within 13.4. That's it. I'm sorry. If we go to 1328.11, conditional use standards for the RC district, that's where it provides under section B1 that the buffer yard H applies. Is that right?
Yes, along residential properties.
Along residential property. So if we go back to what they were saying in their application, they were explaining to the township the buffer yard required along residential property. And on this site, the only buffer yard along residential properties is the east buffer yard. Is that right?
And south.
East and
Yes.
south, right, and that's 131 Montclair.
Yes.
And neither of those buffer yards are in the RC zoning district, are they?
No, they're not.
So if you were trying to meet criteria for a conditional use, you would never take the criteria of a buffer yard for the SC zoning district and apply it to the C3 zoning district, would you?
No.
The correct thing to do, if there's a buffer yard requirement adjacent to residential, would be to look at what the buffer yard criteria was for the right zoning district, wouldn't you?
Yes.
So if I direct your attention to the the C3 zoning district, section 1331.02E, buffer yards adjacent to residential districts, what buffer yard is required?
A G.
So the only way you could get to the conclusion that the applicant reached is if you tried to apply the RC buffer requirements adjacent to residential, of which there is none here, right?
Yes.
To the C3 district, isn't that right?
Correct.
And that would be applying inapplicable criteria, would it not?
Yes, to the entire site.
Rather than rehashing the same discussion, I think the point was made. We're looking at criteria outside of the conditions, so I don't think I have anything further for it.
I don't think there's any other,
I have a
questions.
quick
You have your
question.
Next witness, sorry, go ahead.
What do you consider a sapling? Because you said there were only saplings between there, and I'm looking, and I wouldn't consider anything under 40 feet a sapling. Or above
Well,
40 feet.
in the back, I'm not sure if you have a copy of the.
I have a copy of the Google actual photograph.
Well, if you look on the last 2 pages of the report.
Yeah, I
you passed
saw
out,
that. It looks like you've got a picture
Yeah,
through
there's
the
4
thinnest section of trees
Yeah.
between the RC lots and the highway commercial, the C3
Those
lot?
pictures were taken in the back of the 131 up against the residential house that's located at the top of the screen.
These pictures here
Yes,
are facing east.
those pictures are taken from this area right along and through here.
Okay, and they're facing this house.
Some are facing this way, some are facing this way, some even kind of pick up that house.
So this tree here, it looks like it's about 16 inches around at the base. Is that a
I said the
sapling?
majority of the, I'll say, existing trees in that area are 1 inch, 1.5 inch caliber type of small trees.
But
If
that's-
I may.
But now you're saying that's not on the,
It's not.
on the, even what you guys have tried to turn this into as far as changing it from the entire plan, you're saying that those aren't, you're saying that they don't qualify for the RC area, but you're taking pictures from the residential into the
What we're
commercial.
saying is they're deficient in regard to their planting at that portion of the site.
Right, but you're saying that we can't count that portion of the site because
They're
this is the
saying
only
they-
portion we're allowed to talk about.
No,
They're-
no. Let me clarify. So they submitted an application
For the whole site,
for the whole site,
right,
and it's in the report. It's right here,
right.
And it shows the trees that they are relying upon to meet the buffer requirement. Back here, they show no trees. So we're not saying that they cannot rely upon existing trees to meet their buffer requirement. But if they are going to rely upon existing trees, they need to identify it on their plan so that they can demonstrate that they do meet the buffer requirement.
Right, but you're saying that they can't, we aren't able to consider that lot because it's not part of the RC district.
They're asking you not to
No,
look at that lot.
you are asking us, you asked us not to look at that lot, that we could, you said we could not look at that lot because it was part of the RC, it was not part of the RC district. And then your witness took pictures of only looking at that lot from the residential.
Let's only address the
Side.
buffer. So let's be clear. The applicant started this proceeding this evening, and they insisted that it had nothing to do with 131 Montclair, and that this application was strictly limited to the 3 properties on Perry Highway.
Okay.
However, in all the materials that are before you, their application, the diagrams, their narrative explanation, they rely wholly upon 131 Montclair to convince you that they meet their criteria.
Well-
They can't have it both ways. They
Well,
can't
that's,
say-
I mean,
So,
I feel
I'm
like you're
saying
doing that.
I'm saying that if they were willing to agree that you should not look at anything in 131 Montclair, then that was fine with us. Then they couldn't meet the criteria because they don't even have setbacks pertaining to the Perry Highway properties.
But am I not correct in thinking that a gas station can go on a highway commercial property
You mean
over 30,000
RC?
square feet?
RC or R?
No, I mean a highway commercial C3 with the
Oh, C3?
131
Can a
is.
gas station go there?
Yes,
Yes.
right. Okay. So I mean, I'm not trying to be this way, but I'm not understanding. You're telling us that we are
Put the
only,
site plan up instead of the.
this is the conditional use property, right here.
That's what they say.
We're only allowed to look at this property.
That's what they say.
So then you say, we're only allowed to look at this property,
No, that's what
except
they
for
say.
when I wanna look at this property up here.
No, get it right.
And, well, I'm looking at the pictures and you just told me that that's where those pictures were taken. But, so, other than the setbacks from residential, they can build on this property or this property. They have the 30,000 square feet on both.
I'm not, there may be 100 alternative plans that they could present. There's only one plan in front of us tonight.
But we aren't allowed to use the plan in front of us tonight.
Look, you are trying to pin on me.
No, I'm
let me
trying to
finish,
understand
let me
what you're
finish, please.
doing.
Let me finish, please. You're trying to pin on me the desire to confine this discussion tonight
to the Perry Highway properties only, and that's wrong. That's what Sheets wanted to do tonight. The point.
You said that, though.
Let me finish. No,
Yes, you did.
You
Yes,
said,
you
as
did.
long as we don't discuss any of the property behind there, that was your
you
words.
did.
let me clarify if I may. I respect your position. I said to them, all right, if you're willing to confine your discussion to the RC district, then that's fine with me. But the problem is, when they come to this council tonight telling you that they meet the criteria for the special, for the conditional use, they cannot do it without pointing you to 131 Montclair. Because they use 131 Montclair to meet the conditions for the special exception. That's what they chose to do. It would be in my, I would
So if they
prefer that you
posted-
never look at 131 Montclair, because then you have to deny it immediately. Because they cannot meet the conditions without going to 131 Montclair.
So if they had posted 131 Montclair in with this group, even though it wouldn't be part of the conditional use, then your entire argument's simply gone.
That's actually improved, because then you could show, then we would show that they're using the wrong buffer yards, they're not building the protective walls that are supposed to be included, and since they, in making their argument in the application materials, ask you to look at 131 Montclair, I would rather just exclude it altogether. But they want you to look at it because it's on their application. And if you don't look at it, they can't meet the criteria of the ordinance.
But they can build a gas station on the RC. They have the ability to build a station there. Not with the plans that exist, correct?
I can't answer that question because
Well, according to setbacks, it got 65 feet by about 130 feet
you've got a 100-foot setback.
from the rear
So
of a residential property.
I'm not designing this
But-
for them, and I couldn't do it if you asked me to, but I can't answer your question whether or not they would have a sufficient buildable area to build a gas station just in the C3. I don't know, and that's not before us. It's a hypothetical question.
Okay, well then neither is that. Neither is the C3 commercial property.
Do you have another question?
I guess not. I'm gonna get the same answer anyhow, so.
Mr. Ferguson, do you have any other witnesses?
Nope.
Mr. Zandier, do you have any other witnesses?
I do not.
I know I'm
Do
right.
you have any other testimony you'd like to provide?
Yes. Repeat what I've asked before. When I look at these drawings, just what the councilman is asking, if you look at the three properties, the RC properties, nothing before us says, here's where we're gonna build a gas station. Complete gas station on those three properties. No one is doing that with anything they're showing. No drawing, nothing says, here's our complete gas station on these three properties, which is the agenda question. So I'm confused as to why we are wrangling through all of these details without addressing that specific issue. There's no drawing that supports it.
Okay, yeah, do you want to just keep plowing forward? Do you want- I don't know, it's up to council.
Do we need a 5-minute break? Yes, we need a 5-minute break. Thank you for making us break.